If you want to become a difference maker, relationships are going to be crucial, especially the ones that you build with your family. This episode is going to outline for you exactly how to build solid relationships. But what if you feel disconnected from yourself because you've experienced childhood trauma or you have some unresolved baggage in your past? How do you ensure that you're building solid and healthy relationships? In this episode, I'm speaking with counselor and coach Quentin Hafner, and we're going to dive into that specific topic. Quentin is going to tell us what kind of relationship the women in our lives are expecting from men in this modern age. You're also going to learn how to make a difference in your children's lives, even if you were raised by abusive parents. Understand what a healthy level of participation is and expected from dads when it comes to relationships they build. And we know that men often struggle with reaching out and expressing their emotions more than women. Quentin is going to explain exactly why. And if you want to become a difference maker dad, Quentin is going to give you the first step that you need to take. My conversation with Quentin Hafner starts right now. Hello, my friend. Welcome to another episode of the DMD podcast. My name is Cam Hall. I am your host, and I am excited that you're here today. We are now on episode 17. We are rolling along. I am pumped for today's conversation. I am honestly coming off of an amazing family vacation. I hope you've had some time this summer months to get away with your family and holiday. And I shared a little bit in a solo episode a few weeks ago how I felt guilty about not being present during a camping trip that we were on as a family. And so I was really conscious about that over the last few weeks. I got to tell you, we had an amazing time. We were blessed with amazing weather. We were on the Oregon coast. Amazing sights. If you've never been there, you need to go. It's quite the drive. We made the drive with our family, 16 hours each way, with a 8-year-old and a 10-year-old who did fantastic, but it was an amazing time. And I came back knowing that this episode was launching this week, that it was coming out on this Wednesday. And I am pumped for you to hear it. I've been waiting for this episode for us to be able to put this out there because I'm having more conversations with men who feel stuck in their ability to build relationships, maybe because in their life they've experienced something bad. Maybe they had childhood trauma. They grew up in an abusive home. They've never really been able to have solid and hold down solid relationships. I'm going to tell you, this is the episode for you. You need to hear this. And if you are someone listening to this right now and you listen to this episode and you hear what Quentin has to share and it brings you value in any way, please pay it forward. Share this episode with someone you know. Share it on social media. Take the link, get it from wherever you're listening or watching right now. And of course, if this brings you value and you appreciate this, please subscribe, rate, and review. Help us build some traction so we can get into the ears and to the eyes of more men so that they can become dads making a difference. Well, today I am joined by counselor, therapist, and coach Quentin Hafner. Quentin's life's work is about helping people move from feeling frustrated, confused, and distracted by the challenges that they're facing to a point where they're reclaiming peace of mind, feeling more energized, and ultimately discovering sustainable solutions to the challenges that they're encountering day to day. This is in their family, this means in their business, and this means in the world around them. That is what we're doing here with the DMD podcast. And so I love that is Quentin's mission. Like I said, Quentin is a therapist and a consultant. He spent many years working in the corporate world. And so he takes a real unique approach when it comes to helping men overcome the challenges that they're facing. He has a very, entrepreneurial spirit when he's talking to men. And so he comes from his counseling perspective with a counselor's heart and an entrepreneur's mind, and it's amazing. Quentin is also the author of a #1 best-selling marriage book called Black Belt Husband. You can get that on Amazon right now. It's an amazing read. And maybe you'd guess from the title that Quentin has a background in martial arts and jujitsu. And so that is something that he loves to do. We'll talk about that a little bit in this episode. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Quentin Hafner. Quentin, welcome to the DMD podcast, brother. It is great to have you here.
Thanks, Cameron. Super excited to chat with you. And excited.
Awesome, man. So, we were talking a little bit before we pressed record, and I mentioned how, we've had conversations on this podcast with experts and influencers, bloggers, coaches, therapists in different areas. And some have spoken about marriage and some have spoken about feelings and emotions. But I was really looking forward to this conversation with you because, you come from it from such a unique perspective. So Quentin, why don't you start by sharing with the listeners a little bit about that perspective, what led you to become a therapist, a little bit about your story and why you're so passionate about helping men in their relationships and in their development and in their emotional awareness.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll just tell you a little bit about my journey becoming a therapist. So, when I was around 30, I went through a divorce. And it really just rocked my world. And I remember somebody telling me at the time, hey, you should go talk to somebody. You should go see somebody. That's always the nice way that people are trying to tell you that you're a mess. And so I, to be totally honest, I didn't even know what therapy was at the time. I didn't really even understand what that was or what that meant. But I eventually found somebody to work with. And, to say that it was life-changing is like the understatement of my life. So, I kind of went on my own journey and, just started kind of uncovering so many things, even from my past and things I was just had no awareness around, things that contributed to me getting a divorce and that relationship falling apart. And then just somewhere along that kind of experience in therapy, I had this idea that maybe I would want to do that work myself. And so I ended up going to graduate school. I had a really good job at the time. And, I say that because everybody thought I was totally nuts. They're like, wait a minute, you're going to quit your really great job and you're going to go do this like psychology thing. And so it was kind of one of those things where, it's when you feel called to something, it doesn't make sense really to the outside world. It only makes sense to you and maybe the close people around you. So I felt very called to do this and left a very high paying job to, go work for $20 an hour, essentially, doing, social work. So wow. That was kind of the beginning of my journey. And, that was about 15, 16 years ago now. And, since then, my practice has, evolved and specifically it's evolved in that I primarily work with guys. And the reason that's kind of happened is because in the world of therapists, in that profession, it's predominantly female. The ratio in California where I practice is like 4-to-1 women to men. So there's just not that many guys. So if you're a guy and you want to go talk to somebody and you want to talk to another guy, there's just not that many resources out there. So I just ended up kind of being the kind of a go-to guy for guys.
Yeah, it's so true. One of the things I've been struggling with over the last couple of years was some mental health stuff. I've talked about that on the podcast, but I also reference how when I was looking for someone, I probably went through 100 people in my local area because I was like, no female, no female, no female. And to find there's something about finding a guy, because there's this perspective that, and I'm sure there's lots of very qualified and amazing, female psychologists out there who help guys. But as a guy, you're like, there's a little bit about me that I wanted a guy who kind of gets it. Have you found in your interactions, in your line of work, that's kind of a filter guys are using when they come to you?
Yeah, it is. And I agree with you. There's plenty of women out there that are super great at what they do. And I'm sure they could be very helpful for guys. So, hey, guys, if you're listening to this, don't be reluctant to work with
Yeah.
a woman.
True. Yeah.
I've worked with female therapists also throughout my time, and I've had amazing experiences, just a different perspective. But yeah, for the most part, a lot of guys, they'll come to me and they'll say, like, and I say, I don't say this, braggingly or arrogantly, but they'll just say, you know what, you just seem kind of like a normal guy. And I like, you're kind of normal. And like somehow in our profession, that's like a really big compliment. So I don't know what it says about the profession, but just being kind of a guy's guy, and that I feel like I can relate to guys on a certain level. It's just, yeah, that's been just a good branding tool for me, I guess.
Yeah. You're not the guy in the black suit, the bald head, the mahogany shelves and the leather clad furniture. Like this stereotype
Exactly.
that guys expect when they walk into an office or connect with another guy in, a counseling or therapy session. Right. Like, so no, that's
Yeah.
cool. Um,
Yeah.
I want to circle back just for a moment. You mentioned that when you were 30, you went through a divorce. Were you a father at that point in time?
No, and excuse me, I'm thankful that I didn't have kids with my first
Mm,
wife, and I feel like God, in some ways, really kind of spared me from that, because I look back at that time and man, I was so ill-equipped. I mean, not only to be married, but to be a father then. So I didn't have kids with her. That was a real blessing. I know divorce gets a lot more complicated when you have kids. So in so many ways, I kind of dodged a bullet with that.
yeah. But you're a dad now.
I am a dad now,
Yeah.
and my boys mean everything to me. And it's like everything in God's timing. I feel like I ended up we had our first son when I was I guess 37. I was 37 when we had our first son, and
Amazing.
that's the time when I felt like I was ready.
Yeah, amazing. I'm going to lean into that a little bit. You mentioned how that divorce was an experience in your life that was a trigger for kind of a change of events in your career choice, which you wanted to pursue. Then you become a dad. So share with us a couple, experiences, realizations, maybe successes, maybe some failures that have shaped you as a father.
Well, I have a pretty, I don't know what to say. I have a pretty traumatic story about my own father experience.
Mm,
So when I became a dad, oh man, it just brought up so many feelings for me, so many emotions. So just briefly, my biological dad was a heroin addict that I essentially never knew. He and my mom split up when I was about 6 months old, and I've never seen him. I've never met him, never seen him again. And so that was like the first father wound, just not knowing my biological dad. And then my mom remarried my stepdad, who was a pretty abusive alcoholic. And so I unfortunately had to kind of live through that terror growing up, and having him as a father, um, kind of a father figure, a father role model. And so, when I became a dad, it was like, in some ways I had to kind of, it's not like I had to go back and wrestle with all that stuff again, but it just brought up a lot of that stuff again. I had to kind of like rethink my own relationship to my father. And, for the most part, I've done so much work on myself that when I did become a dad, I just felt really ready to be a dad, and so I'm so thankful for that. And the way I look at my kids and the relationships that I have with them now, it really feels like kind of like just like a beautiful kind of like offering that I'm giving them and they're giving me. It's almost like a redo from my own experiences. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
What a cool opportunity to build relationship. You mentioned that there's this opportunity. It was almost like a fresh start, hey, to kind of flip the switch on maybe a path that you could have gone down, having the background that you've had. And now being a guy with kids of his own who's, finding this opportunity to step into a role that maybe at one point in your life you weren't fully prepared to take on and weren't ready for. And they said, yeah, it's 37. I was just ready. I was just ready to do this. God made this happen at that point in time when you're ready. And I don't think that was an accident. So I just want to lift you up a little bit right now, man, and
Thanks,
tell you
man.
how cool it is to hear your story, and that, your dad right now is making a difference in the life of his family. So
thank you. I appreciate
cool.
that,
No,
Cameron.
thanks for sharing.
Yeah. I would just, I feel so blessed to be a dad. I feel so blessed to have them in my life and the joy that they bring me. And, it certainly is a beautiful redemption story that I feel like I get to participate in. So that's never lost on me. I always, I'm always thinking about that. And, just even I'll look at my little guys and just the contrast of the relationship that I have with them versus the relationship that I had with my stepdad growing up, and just seeing their experiences and remembering my experiences. And it's nothing that I did too. I just maybe I want to make that clear too, because I'm not trying to take credit for something at all. It's really just, the work of God and the work that, God put certain people in my life that allowed me to heal. And I'm just so grateful for that.
Yeah, very cool. I want to go towards now what you do and how your experiences have kind of shaped your role, as a professional. I've heard you speak before about, men becoming active versus passive participants in their relationships, about guys reclaiming their masculinity. And masculinity comes up a lot in our conversations on this podcast. Sometimes, maybe toxic masculinity versus manhood masculinity, but without getting too much into that, but how do you become a father? And I'm not asking you, but like when you're working with men who want to become active participants in their building relationships, how do men become a difference maker in their relationships and in their family?
Oh, what a great question. How to become a difference maker. Well, let me back up a second and kind of tell you where, some of my thinking has come from, and, some of the work that I've done, because being in my position, I was just talking to a friend about this the other day, and I just said, being in the position that I'm in the work that I do, it's really a privilege, because I get to see, day in and day out firsthand all the mistakes to avoid. It's a crazy kind of world that I live in too, because I see, I see guys make mistakes, or, go right when they should have gone left, or do this thing when they should have done that thing. And I see the natural consequences that unfold. I mean, it's like, that's the world that I'm living in. Mm. And so I'm really privileged in that way, because like, I don't have any delusions that, having an affair, would be a good choice, or would be satisfying, or it would be even tempting at this point, because I've seen so many guys go down that road, and I've seen the destruction that's come from it. And so, my passion in helping guys has come a lot from just seeing so many story after story of guys that they were really good guys. They were good guys. They were well-intended guys. And they just didn't know what it really took to be successful as a family person, because they came from their own families. It may not have been like abusive and traumatic, like it might have been, or may not have been. Yeah. But they just came from their own family experiences that they didn't have that role modeling. So sometimes I just feel like I'm this guy with this like bullhorn trying to like scream at the top of the mountain saying, guys, like, look out, there's a cliff over there and you're going to fall off the cliff. And I promise you, if you don't believe me, look down, you're going to see all these dead bodies down there, because so many guys before you have kind of walked off that cliff. So that's where that's where my passion comes from, just because I've seen so many families break apart. I've seen so many, just horrible things happen. And, for whatever reason, God just put me in that role. And so, I'm just trying to help men avoid those pitfalls.
And so when you're helping men avoid those pitfalls, what are some of the consistencies that you see that men are struggling with? Like these things that, pop up that are causing issues in their relationships or in their marriage. Like you said, you get to see, unfortunately, you get to see people kind of sometimes at their worst, right? When they really need help or they really kind of messed up. And there's guys listening to this right now who are probably going through stuff and they're like, do I reach out to someone? Do I not? But what have you seen, guys? What are they struggling with?
Oh, that is such a good question. So, man, there's so many different ways we could take that question, but I'm going to try to make it simple for the sake of our conversation. So, and I'm going to be super generalizing right now. And I know there's exceptions, but just for our conversation, I have to be kind of general in thinking about this. Guys don't really know how to have relationships, and they get into marriage or fatherhood, same thing.
Yeah.
And they are kind of operating in an old paradigm that worked in prior generations. It actually didn't work, but it happened. And they're taking that paradigm and applying it to their relationship today, and it's never going to work. And guys don't have the updated skill set in order to be successful in relationships. And so they go into relationships and they have this idea that they say, okay, well, as long as I'm, as long as I, don't drink too much, as long as I, don't hit the kids, and as long as I, keep making money to support the family, like, isn't that enough? Like, what are you complaining about, wife?
Right.
And so the bar on relationships has been rightfully elevated. And so there's a gap right now. There's a skills gap between what is expected of guys in relationships and where guys' skills are at. And if I can help guys fulfill that skill gap, they're going to be thriving. It's not just relationally, but it's going to impact their business. It's going to impact so many areas of life. And so what I'm trying to help guys with is developing the skills to close that gap.
Yeah, amazing. Do you feel that the reason that there's such a gap is because men are buying into this portrayal of what a traditional perhaps relationship or marriage would be? Like when you think about how marriage has been portrayed in media, I think about even the TV shows I saw when I was growing up, like as a young kid in the 80s, and how even before that, like we go back to like the 70s and 60s of how the image of the father and the mother in the home and the role of the kids in the home was portrayed. Do you feel that we are now seeing this gap because of a misunderstanding of the roles in relationships?
For sure. 100%. Yeah. And, I write about that a little bit in the book, and I talk about kind of the sociological aspects of like how we are kind of where we are, and, different movements and time, and how we've kind of landed in this place. But, essentially men by and large are looking for a utilitarian relationship. Like, I want it to be functioning. I'm looking for utility. I'm looking for you to take care of the kids, and I'm looking for you to clean the house, and I'm looking for you to have sex with me sometimes. And I'm looking for you to be accommodating to me. And I'm going to go out here and I'm going to make the money and I'm going to come home. And so that's going to be my responsibility. And this is going to be your responsibility. And we're going to function really well together. We're going to have lots of utility. And that kind of utilitarian aspect of a relationship is an old model of relationship. And what women are expecting in today, in 2022, is a way more rich relationship. They're expecting something that's more deeply connected on an emotional level. And a lot of guys are like, what are you talking about? How do I even do that? What does that even mean to be connected on an emotional level? Because I never saw my dad do that. My dad didn't do that with me.
Yeah.
And my friends on the golf course, they don't talk about that. They don't do that with their wives. And so there's that really big gap. And and just to clarify too, that having a utilitarian relationship is not a bad thing. It's a very important thing. It's good to have utility, but guys get just stuck there. They get kind of concretized in that utilitarian aspect because they don't know how to do the emotional part of things, and then relationships start to get sideways.
So let's talk about the emotional side of things. Guys struggle with processing emotion. I can speak from my own experience that there's been times where maybe anger has come out, and anger's what is portrayed, but it's not actually what is being felt. Maybe there's frustration, maybe there's apathy. You've spoken on that before about apathy in relationships. Can you speak to men's struggle with, feelings? Because guys hear the word feelings and they think soft, right? And I've heard you speak, and it's the opposite. Like, feelings aren't being soft because you have feelings or you're processing emotion, or like you said at the beginning of our conversation, you reach out to connect with someone or for help. That doesn't make you soft. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Maybe, you're probably like this. I'm like this, and I think guys are generally, we're thinkers, we're kind of logical creatures. We're rational. And this is there's a lot of nuance to this, but just generally, if I was going to break it down, I would tell you that women are a lot more connected emotionally, and men are a lot more rational. And that is a beautiful thing. What a wonderful thing that we're kind of different in that way. I know some people are listening to that and they're going to cringe because they're going to say, no, women are rational too. It doesn't mean that women are not rational. Just as a general rule of thumb, men are kind of cognitive people and women are more feeling people. Okay. And so what a great difference. We want to celebrate that difference. And where a lot of guys get stuck is that if I said to a guy like, oh, it'd be really good for you to learn how to become more emotionally engaged in your relationship, they're kind of like, ooh, I just don't even like the way that sounds. I don't even like the way that sounds, like even a little bit, right?
Yeah. Too risky.
Because too risky. Are you trying to change me? Are you trying to make me, some soft, weak person that, me and my friends are going to make fun of? And so it's not that. And that's why the black belt husband thing.
Yeah.
Was like, what I was trying to do there was trying to tell guys, like, you can be a savage killer and still talk about your feelings. That does, like, these are not at odds with each other, and I would even argue the point that the stronger you are as a man, the more secure you are in your manhood and in your masculinity, the easier it is for you to be able to talk about your feelings. And so it's a little bit like upside down, because a lot of guys are like, well, I'm not going to talk about my feelings. It's like, man, that just makes you weak. Like, you don't really realize it, but a lot of guys are going to judge you for that and say, that's like little boy material, because when you move into manhood, true masculine manhood, you're not afraid to say that I feel sad. You're not afraid to say that I feel lonely. You're not afraid to say that I'm scared. Because that it doesn't change the essence of who you are and the masculinity that is inherent inside of you. So it's kind of like an upside down universe a little bit for a lot of guys. Yeah. And a lot of that book was trying to help guys see it from that perspective. Anyways, does that kind of make sense the way I'm thinking about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the book, the Black Belt Husband, which you wrote. And in that book, you go through different belt levels of progression. I have two young kids, 7 and 10, who do karate. And so, you start with going in, you just got your white belt, then you got your yellow belt, and you're working up and you go through the different colors, just briefly, because I want to get back to the taking risks and the feelings part. But briefly, can you touch on where you came up with this belt system, what it's framed upon?
Yeah, so I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as a hobby. So the book is kind of like using Jiu-Jitsu as a metaphor for relationships, or a metaphor for marriage. And in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or just like any martial art, you start as the beginner and you're trying to kind of move up to become, an expert, let's say. And so I look at marriage so much in the same way. In the beginning of marriage, it's like, man, you get married. What do you know about marriage? You don't know anything, right? You're not supposed to know anything. You're brand new. You're a white belt. You're the beginner.
Yeah.
And so what are the character traits that you're supposed to kind of embody in that beginner's kind of frame of mind, self-awareness and humility, and things like that. And then you move up through the belt structure, and then eventually get to that place where you can feel confident, like, you know what, like, I know how to do this. Because a lot of guys, they feel very uncertain about how to be a husband. It's very shaky ground. If I ask them, like, hey, how do you be a good husband? They're like, man, I don't know. Like, plan a date night, come home on time. And it's like, man, I just want to help guys raise the bar, because even if your marriage survives and you don't get a divorce, even not getting a divorce is such a low bar to set, because it's like, do we really want to be unhappy for that duration? So I think there's a higher standard that we could all call ourselves to, that ultimately is going to be to our benefit.
Yeah. I love that. I bring up the question lots with guys about, becoming a difference maker and what that means. And we talk about being a difference maker in your family, in your business, and the community around you. And a guy will say, like, well, what's a difference maker? And we found that the guys I'm speaking with, it means something different to everyone, like their own perception of what making a difference, a dad making a difference, what that means in their home. And it's amazing, Quentin, how a guy will share with me what it looks like to be a difference maker in his home. And yet that's so contrary to what he thinks being a difference maker in his community versus business is. And there almost seems like a disconnect, because at home, it's like, I need to be this guy for my kids and this guy for my wife. And then in his business, when he talks about his community and his business, it's like, it's almost more natural and it's easy for him to talk about. But when we talk about making a difference at home, guys are like, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure what that means. And, you're speaking to guys not being super emotional being, like, we are emotional beings, but we don't process that way. Yeah. So it definitely makes sense. I appreciate you sharing a little bit about that progression, that mastery piece.
Well, let me say something about what you just said too, because I think you just said something really interesting, about the guys not sure how to be a difference maker. And I think a lot of that comes from, a lack of role modeling for so many guys, like, I mean, sadly, my role modeling to become a good husband or a dad came from a therapist. And I'm saying that sadly, because I didn't have that naturally. I did have a good uncle, so that's not totally fair, but I didn't have like a great grandfather, and I didn't have a dad figure. And I didn't have, like, my dad didn't have friends that kind of poured into me. And I think a lot of guys are like that. They're just kind of like on their own, trying to be like, I don't know, like, I'm going to go to work and I'm going to make money because I think that's important. And I know I'm supposed to be a provider. And so there's not really a lot of role modeling for typical guys to kind of look at and say, oh, okay, like, I just want to emulate what you do. Like, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. Yeah. I don't have to think it about for myself. I'll follow your lead. You've been successful. I don't think a lot of guys have that.
Yeah. And we speak to the dangers of isolation, right? You and I are part of a mastermind group where, there's a gentleman who leads that, who will be interviewing on the podcast, Aaron Walker, and he speaks how isolation is the enemy of excellence. And I think that speaks as well as in this case where you don't have a role model, and how you need to seek out people to be involved in your life who will push you to be better, who will push you to push the envelope of your comfort level, hold you accountable, lift you up, keep you humble, all those things. And so, no, I appreciate you bringing that point up. There's guys in isolation. What would you say to those men right now who are listening to this and are like, I feel like I'm in isolation? Like, what do they do? Maybe as it relates to reaching out to surrounding themselves, but also in how it relates to your work and what you do.
Well, I just want to say that, it takes so much courage to admit even that you're isolated. And, so if you're kind of wondering if you're isolated, you're probably isolated. And the truth is, we all get isolated. I mean, even me being part of a mastermind group doesn't mean that I'm not isolated at times. It depends on how much I want to lean into my mastermind group to, let them know what's going on for me. And so I guess I just want people to know that it just takes a lot of courage to admit that. And it takes even more courage to say that you don't want to be isolated and that you want to reach out for help. And so a lot of times, if I say to somebody that they might be isolated and they could be, they could benefit from more relationships or more role modeling or more groups, that's not really a great selling point for guys, because I think the selling point is that your isolation feels bad, and it feels bad. It hurts. It's a painful way to go through life, to always be unsure, to be wondering, or to feel lonely, and to feel just really disconnected. Like nobody knows you, like nobody really knows you. And the great selling point for it all is to realize that you're going to just feel like $1 million. You're going to feel like 1,000-pound weight gets lifted off your back when you become connected with people that you can relate to, people that you want to aspire to be like, people that are further ahead of you, people that are behind you. That's one of the beautiful things about jiu-jitsu too, is that when you go and train, there's always somebody better than you, and there's always somebody worse than you. And so you have this really wonderful natural experience of kind of getting taught by people and then having an opportunity to kind of teach others. And so if you want to get connected, you can reach out to me personally. I'm not trying to sell any of my own services. I know how to plug people into stuff. But there's so many great resources out there to help guys not get isolated and not be isolated. And it's the ultimate act of strength.
Yeah.
So you have to really challenge that inner critic and that voice inside your head that's going to say, oh, only weak men do that, or these losers do that. It's like not true. Like, I mean, there's guys in my mastermind group that I'm like, dude, you guys are light years ahead of me. I'm working to be like you guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And that speaks to the importance of reaching out. And especially when it comes to the importance of reaching out, even for professional help. There's the stigma, and I think the greatest barrier is the first step. And it often is in many of the things we do. The first step is often the hardest. There's a little bit of, oh, should I take it? Should I not? That wavering back and forth, like when we watch our kids fall along the furniture. There's a little bit of scaffolding piece where you're leaning up against, and maybe you're listening to the podcast, or maybe you're plugged into a community group, or you're reading a book. Like these things that can kind of prop you up, but you haven't taken that step on your own to reach out for professional help. And so I appreciate you saying, like, reach out, because that first step, guys, I can tell you, if you're watching this on YouTube or listening, as a guy for a long time who was like, I can't do that, I should do this, and then finally reached out and finally sought out professional help, it was a game changer. It was a game changer for me individually. It was a game changer for me in my relationship with my wife and my kids. And so listen to Quentin right now, take that first step and reach out.
Well, it's funny, just to piggyback on what you're saying, a lot of guys too, that, we're kind of okay reaching out for help when it comes to like growing our business, so if you have some like marketing challenge, you don't know how to do it, you're like, oh yeah, I'll hire this marketing consultant, they'll help me. But then when it comes to our personal lives, and something's kind of wobbly, something's not working right, it seems like that's where guys really have a hard time reaching out. And whether it's pride, ego.
Why is that?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with pride. It has a lot to do with ego. Yeah. And it has a lot to do with fear of judgment. It has a lot to do with fear of judgment, fear of shame, of feeling like I'm a failure because I needed to ask someone, how to be a good husband or how to be a good father. It's a very shameful experience. But if I say, oh, well, my business is doing $1 million and I want to ask someone to help me take it to $2 million, it doesn't feel shameful because it feels like it's all good trajectory.
Right. Yeah.
And, but the thing about reaching out on the personal side, and I was talking to Aaron about this earlier on the podcast, it's like, what good is it to have all the money in the world, all the riches, all the material possessions, the new cars, the new houses, the vacations, and knowing that there's going to be a point in time where it's all going to come crashing down. because the way that you're doing your life is simply not sustainable. It cannot keep going on the way it's going on. And so you work so hard to accumulate so much only to know that it's all going to evaporate.
Right.
And so it's like, let's engage our rational brains. Remember, we were talking about we're rational creatures as men. It's like, that's not a rational thing to do.
No. I've coached men since 2015, and guys will put themselves through the ringer chasing the side gig or financial freedom or working overtime, or even in their health, where I coach guys to like lose weight, get more energy, all these types of things. When I ask them why, especially if they're dads, I guarantee you the why is their family. And so their why is, I want to be able to be more present. I want to be more energetic and actively engaged in this process. I want to be a better father. And yet, like you said, we'll go in all these other areas. And the next thing you know, you've neglected the driving force behind it. And I think that comes back to ego, where it no longer becomes about that why, and it becomes about you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's an unfortunate reality. And I got to check myself on this too, because I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I love my business. I love trying to grow my business. I mean, I'm always thinking about stuff. So if anybody listening can relate to that, just know that I'm one of those. I'm one of your types.
Yeah.
And I have to check myself too, because, if I start working too much, I can even delude myself with that lie that I'm doing it for my family. It's like, why are you working so much? It's for my family. It's not for my family. It's for me.
Yeah.
I can say that it's for my family, and there's part of it that's true, but there's a part of it that's not true, because there's a big part of just my own ego fulfillment and my own, just wanting to do something cool for myself is wrapped in that too. It's like this much goes for my family, and then everything on top of that is just for my own. So
yeah,
I think if we're all going to be really honest, and by the way, I don't even think that there's anything wrong with that. I think God made us to be creators, and he wants us to build and do really big things and valuable things and cool things. But I don't think it should ever come at the expense or the cost of our families deteriorating.
Yeah. Awesome. Got a question for you.
Okay, go ahead.
As a father, I've been asking you lots of questions, but I love this question. I like to ask guys this, as you grow as a father, because I think we're all growing. What are some of the areas of growth that you have personally committed to, or that you're excited about right now?
Oh, great question. Well, I shared a little bit about the family of origin stuff that I came from, and my stepdad being, just abusive, and so what I have to be really mindful of is I've kind of taken the pendulum and kind of swung it far to the other side, because I'm so terrified of ever becoming anything like him that I've moved it really over here, and I'm very aware of that, and I'm trying to find that middle space, of like, how do I be? Because I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and so they're at still pretty innocent ages, but as time goes on, I'm gonna be challenged more by them, and so I'm trying to find that middle space of like, what does it look like to be like a healthy disciplinarian? I certainly don't want to be like my stepdad. I don't want my kids to be scared of me, but I can't just be the gushy love guy all the time either, because I know that's not good for my kids. So that's my challenge, is trying to find that space. I'm always trying to think about that and think about just my interactions with them. Because there's a whole host of problems if I just stay on that side of the equation too. They're going to look different in the end, but it's problematic. Is that kind of answering your question?
Absolutely. No,
okay,
thanks.
Cool.
Thanks for being a bit vulnerable in answering that. Sometimes when we're put on the spot about areas of growth, we're like, oh, in your head, you're like, what am I growing in? Is this, will people think less of me if I say this? No, but I appreciate the honesty. No, and everything that you've shared today, I know comes from a place based in experience, based in like caring for men. And so, no, I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing. That's good.
Awesome.
Um,
Yeah.
Quentin, our time has flown by, and I know that the guys who listen to this will get, massive value. I'd love to have you on again. Like you speak a whole bunch on marriage, and we didn't even dive into that, and maybe we'll say that for another time. But Quentin, in the meantime, if someone listening today wants to find you online, wants to connect with you, how can they do that?
The best way is probably just through my website, which is quentinhafner.com, QuentinHafner. And then you can follow me on Instagram too. It's Quentin_Hafner. Those are probably the easiest ways.
Excellent. Perfect. And we'll make sure we're going to include all Quentin's contact information in the show notes. I'll also, use a link there where you can pick up his book, The Black Belt Husband. And so you can get reading that. I highly encourage you to pick it up. Quentin, thank you for taking time out of your busy day as a busy dad to be here and to speak into the lives of the guys in our community. I appreciate you.
Oh, I appreciate you too, Cameron. Thanks for having me. I mean, it really is an honor that you'd have me on your podcast, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing too. Okay.
Thank you.